Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk Podcast. As always, I'm Labi, and I'm joined, as always, by Jacob. We got a lot to talk about today. Jacob, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Lab. Sucks that I missed last week's episode, but man, it was a busy week. But let's get right back at it. Here we are. The gruesome twosome are at it again.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, but the
Whatever.
time flies
Listen,
by. Time flies by.
bro. In this time and day, it's like yesterday felt like 2 weeks ago. Yet today feels like it's a weird time.
Yeah, if anyone out there listening is living in Ontario, we feel your struggle of the new lockdowns,
We
and
feel your pain.
yeah, for sure. And honestly, I can relate to maybe last week's episode should be deleted because I don't think we predicted any of these trades. Um, I mean, I'm sure some of the stuff we said is still accurate, but I guess what this means is that GMs just aren't as smart as us, and they should have taken our advice. But
Yeah, come on,
we
buddy. Like
move.
we need to be GMs, bud.
Oh, no, absolutely. So let's get right into the trades, and I'll ask your opinion of them. We'll just quickly do a recap because, we don't want to have two full dedicated episodes just to NHL trades, but we'll go through some of the big ones. And it's kind of funny how we were here doing an episode hyping up the trade deadline, and then the biggest trade happened before deadline day around midnight of the day, and that is Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar to Boston for Anders Bjork and a second round pick. And I'm going to let you call Buffalo morons before I then jump on top of that and continue calling them morons. But go ahead.
I'd like to know. First off, Buffalo morons. I'd like to know what goes on in the mind of Kevin Adams and why he thought this was a good deal. And also, Buffalo retained 50% of Taylor Hall's contract, so it's not like they're out of the woods completely. Um, what the hell were they thinking? Don't you want at least something in return? Like, Bjork is not even close to Hall. Bjork isn't even close to Curtis Lazar, let alone Taylor Hall. And then they get the other, and it's a pick, and like it's not even a first round, like top 10. It's a second rounder.
Yeah, it's a 2021 second round pick. No conditions on the pick, so it can't get upgraded to a first. It's just a straight second rounder.
I don't. I think the only thing Buffalo can win at is losing, and that's all they seem to be good at. They can't win. They get fleeced. Boston fleeced them, and then Taylor Hall in 3 games has got 2 goals already. And I think he got an assist today in the game where they're playing against the Caps. So, wonder who's winning that one already.
Yeah, I mean, I'll pile on a little bit and then I'll try to take Buffalo's side. But
How can you take Buffalo's side on this one?
yeah, it's tough. First of all, because first let's just look at this trade for what it is at face value. If this trade was Curtis Lazar for Anders Bjork and a second round pick, I think people are still calling it a pretty fair trade, to be honest with you, which I think just speaks to how lopsided this trade is.
Yeah.
Because like if you think Lazar on his own for Bjork and a second rounder, then you would think, well, Boston's paying maybe a little bit too much, but like that's not that unrealistic, is it? Right? And if you're thinking along those lines and then completely ignoring Taylor Hall in the trade, then it's a bad trade if you're also picking up Taylor Hall in the trade. Um and my biggest problem with this trade is that Buffalo did it when they did it. Like, if this happened 5 minutes before the deadline where they felt pressured that they had to get a deal done because they were right up against the limit, then fair enough, because then you can make the argument that this is the best offer that they could have made for it. But you're telling me that it was impossible to improve this deal. I find that hard to believe. And I'm saying this before I start to try to defend them, because from what I'm hearing, from certain reputable sources on Twitter. Also, there's this one girl who has a YouTube account. Her name's Melody Martin. She's a
Oh,
Sabres
she's a
fan, and
Sabres
I
fan. Yeah.
I highly recommend her channel. She's hilarious. So she has two videos on this Taylor Hall trade. She had an initial reaction, which resembled a lot like a Steve Dangle after the Leafs lose to Boston type of video. Um, and then she had a next day sort of clear your head type of video where she made a lot of good points. And the one thing that I want to do, say, in sort of defending Buffalo, is Taylor Hall did have a no move clause, a full no move clause, which meant that he had to waive it in order to get traded to a team. And so that probably, limited Buffalo's options to the point where Taylor Hall pretty much could have chosen where he wanted to go. And there are reports saying that it was pretty clear that he wanted to go to Boston. So naturally, in that position, if you're Buffalo, you don't really have a lot of leverage. And so I can sympathize with Buffalo for that reason. But then at the same time, even if you're forced to make a trade with Boston, and even if you're put up against those parameters, the fact that this is the best deal that you can get, I think is still pretty sad, and they still probably should have done better.
And like what you said is they didn't do it right at the deadline. They did it like at midnight the day before. So they had listened to all the trades, and they were like still coming in for him, and they still went with this one despite it being a lose-lose for them.
I mean, at the end of the day, they did get Taylor Hall for nothing. Like, they signed him in free agency, so they're essentially turning nothing into Bjork in a second, which, when you think about it that way, I guess any trade is a win for Buffalo in that case. But still, I agree with you. It would have been great to see Buffalo sort of play their cards a lot closer to their chest and sort of let it drag out. And even if, once again, we're in the situation where Taylor Hall says, I only want to go to Boston, well, the Sabres can still pretty much play hardball. They can basically say, look, Boston, if you don't give us a first, then we're not trading him. We'll just hang on to him and lose him for nothing in free agency, which is admittedly a very ballsy move because there's very much the option that Boston, you're playing chicken there. And it's an extremely ballsy move because, once again, we're living in the reality where this trade happened. I imagine if there was an alternate reality where Buffalo hung on to him because there wasn't a good offer on the board, that, Kevin Adams would be still harshly criticized for not getting anything from him. So, like, I do sympathize with the fact that he felt the need that he had to trade him, but it would have been great to see Buffalo play chicken with Boston and say, the price is a first, and we'll wait until you agree to that, and then see the hours tick down. And how cool would it have been to have been in a situation where it's like 2:30, the deadline's approaching, and Boston and Buffalo are playing chicken with each other. Boston saying, oh, Buffalo will give in and accept our second round pick trade, and Buffalo saying, if you want him, give us a first or else we'll hang on to him. That would have been really cool to see unfold. And maybe that speaks to the fact that when you hire a general manager, you hire a guy with prior experience, because Kevin Adams has zero managerial experience.
Well, not even that. Like they hang on to him, they'll just look at a better deal. There were other trades teams that were like interested in Hall. So if they played chicken with Boston and Boston didn't budge, then they like, okay, we'll go to a different team that's more willing to give us what we want. Other than
There's no guarantees that Taylor Hall would have wanted to go to those teams, though. But
it
I see
doesn't
what you
it,
mean.
it doesn't matter. Like it's not his choice at the end of the day. He can say he wants to go to Boston.
Well, it is because he has a no move clause.
Okay, never mind. I didn't realize he had that.
Yeah, he had a full no move clause, so he had to agree to wherever he ended up going. But still, your point stands. Like, they should have played hardball.
And they didn't, and they lost the deal, and now they look like idiots. Like first an 18 game losing streak, my bad, winning streak doesn't even exist in their minds. And then they lose Taylor Hall for basically nothing, and the rest is history. Like Buffalo deserves like yesterday to the loss to your Penguins, they were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. The first team to do so. There's like 17 games remaining.
Yeah, I mean, that's just because the East is stacked. Has nothing to do with Buffalo being bad. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh,
What do you, like,
the 18 game losing streak has nothing to do with it.
yeah, has nothing to do with the fact that they're out of the playoffs. Let's move
Unbelievable.
on because I want to get your opinion on a couple more trades, and then
Sure.
I do want to pivot the conversation a little bit. I'll let you talk about this one so it's from an unbiased perspective. Jeff Carter to Pittsburgh for a conditional third and a conditional fourth. The conditional third can become a second if the Penguins reach the finals and Carter plays in 50% of the games. And then the conditional fourth becomes a third if Carter plays in 50 games next season. Your thoughts on that trade?
It's a good trade. Carter still can produce with the Penguins. He was incredibly crucial to their two Stanley Cup wins in 2012 and 2014. He was just playing on the Kings, and I think this kind of goes to say a lot of what's going on in what's going on with the Kings right now. Is I think a lot of those players just need a new change of scenery because I think a lot of them can still produce. And I think Jeff Carter coming to the Penguins, who have a legitimate chance again this year, although everyone expected them to be like Buffalo. Um, it's it's good. It's good for the Penguins to get a depth forward. What line are they playing him on right now?
So right now, because of how injured we are, he's currently our second line center. Obviously, when Evgeny Malkin comes back from his injury, that will change. Also, we have Brendan Tanev out injured. So I imagine that if we're fully healthy, Carter's either a third line winger or a third line center. Although keeping in mind that the Penguins' fourth line is essentially our third line. Which I know sounds confusing. So he's basically a bottom six center if we're fully healthy, but he's filling in on the second line while Malkin's injured, and he's played well in his first two games.
Yeah, I've watched the first two games, and he seems to be playing pretty well. He seems to come in and fit on that team pretty well, and I think the Kings will get that condition. I think he'll play 50% if they make it to the final, and I think he'll play 50 games next year. So it's a win-win for both teams, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was actually very interested in the condition. I didn't realize it was both, so they have to make the final. Like, he has to play 50% of the games, which will happen, and they have to make the final, which is a good condition because if we make the final, I don't care if we're giving up a second rounder.
Right.
And yeah, like it is very low risk. If it doesn't work out and either we don't make the finals this year or he doesn't work out long term, then it's a third and a fourth. I'm not too picky. Like, considering I cheer for a team who trades their first round pick every year, I'm not worried about giving away a third and a fourth. And then if the trade does work out and we make the finals, I have no problem getting rid of a second. So yeah, definitely like a low risk move, but it's good for our center depth, particularly with how injured we are.
Yeah, you guys still have a lot of injuries plaguing that team.
Oh yeah, I mean Malkin's still out. Bluger just returned, thank God. The play he made last night to set up a goal, batted a clearance behind the net out of midair, and then fed a slot pass. I'm a huge Teddy Bluger fan, as I'm sure everyone knows. But yeah, Brendan Tanev is still injured. We have a lot of injured players. The last trade that I wanted to talk about, and then if there's any others that you want to mention, by all means, you can go ahead. But yeah, the Washington Capitals get a very good player in Anthony Mantha, but did they pay a lot to get him? We're talking Richard Panik, Jakub Verana, a first and a second for Anthony Mantha. And I like Anthony Mantha, but I don't like him that much.
His first game, he got an assist and a goal, led the team with 6 shots on net. It's working out so far, and Vrana scored in his first game with Detroit. So right now, it's looking good on both sides. You can argue that Stevie Yzerman kind of fleeced the Caps for this one, but Mantha's still a great player. Like, he still can produce, and he can still play pretty well. He was just on Detroit. He was leading that team in goals last year and leading them in points this year. So I honestly think it's a great deal, and I think that both teams are going to really win out of this one.
Yeah, I mean, once again, not to drag Buffalo back into it, because like I said, the circumstances are different with no move clauses and everything. But this is an example. Stevie Yzerman is showing rebuilding teams how you navigate a trade deadline. Because
Yeah.
this trade happened right up against the deadline. And so this was basically, I can imagine that how this went is that the Capitals and probably other teams were interested in Mantha. Yzerman was asking for a lot, but he stuck to his guns. And then when 230, 245, 259 came rolling around and teams were scrambling because they hadn't made a move yet, eventually a team said, okay, fine, we'll pay that price tag. And that's good general management. That's Stevie Y making sure that when he's trading a player, he is getting a lot of value in return. And like you said, for Washington, if Mantha plays well, then at the end of the day, the trade can't be looked at in a bad way. And I agree with you. In a sense, it can be thought of as a win-win, even though I still think Washington overpaid. But they're getting a good player, and as long as he helps out in their playoff push, that's all they really, truly care about. And then for Detroit, Panik and Verona can produce, and they're still young. That first-round pick, probably going to be a mid to late first and not the strongest draft, but still, that's 2 draft picks that give them flexibility and that they can use. And Detroit's a team that historically is drafted really well. So, I mean, the fact that they got all of that just to give up one player who is probably going to leave them anyways, the phenomenal job from Stevie Y.
Yeah, but I don't. I'm gonna disagree with you in saying that Washington overpaid when like it's a hard situation in Detroit because their best player is another team's third liner, second liner because of how rebuild mode they are right now. So I think by picking up their best player, they've definitely improved their veteran depth and they've definitely improved their goal scoring and assist tallies. And I think that Mantha is going to do extremely well in Washington, especially with guys like Ovechkin and the second deadliest power play in the league. I just think it's going to be a good change of scenery for him for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure he'll do well in Washington, for sure. Maybe it's Penguins bias, looking at it that way, but I mean, I think it's also a little bit of like the Taylor Hall trade effect, where if Taylor Hall's only getting a second and then you get 2 roster players, a first and a second for an Anthony Mantha, it looks like a gross overpay, but that's just because the Taylor Hall trade was like a severe underpay. So I definitely see your point. Before we move on, are there any other specific trades that you wanted to mention?
Uh, we talked about the Riddick trade. Yeah,
Yeah, last week we did
yeah.
mention the Riddick trade. The Leafs also pick up Ben Hutton, so it looks like it looks like Freddie's like 4th choice goalie now. Which, if you had told the Leafs fan 2 years ago that the Leafs would be trading for other goalies to replace Freddie Anderson, they'd call you crazy. But that's the reality we're living in right now.
And that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning of the season. I was saying to everyone the Leafs are just going to roll with a 50-50 combo next year. And with Riddick and Campbell, it sure looks like it. Freddie's probably going to walk in free agency. Have been saying this for months now. And Hutchinson, I think Freddie over Hutchinson. No disrespect to Hutchinson, but Leaf fans know both of them. Comparably, there's no comparison. Um, but yeah, I think the Leafs are going to roll with Riddick and Campbell. Riddick lost in his first game, but the Leafs played like absolute crap. They're on a 3-game losing streak right now. They play the COVID-riddled Canucks tonight in the Canucks' first game back. So I'm hoping that the Leafs make something out of this game tonight.
Yeah, it's a very winnable game for sure. I think that every team's going to look at the Canucks as a winnable game. And I mean, you can argue it's unfair of the NHL to force the Canucks to return so soon, but I mean, and I would agree with them on that. It's unfortunate that this is the reality we're living in, where they have to try to fit these games in. But yeah,
But
at least they got one extra day. They pushed back Saturday's game to Sunday night, but
But
it's tough.
they knew this was going to happen. They knew if you got COVID that they still had to stay on the deadline. Even if they didn't like it, they had to.
Yep. And
So
then one more piece of hockey news is Patrick Marleau last night tied the NHL record for most games played, tied Gordie Howe's record, and I'd assume that the Sharks' next game is Monday night.
yeah, I believe so.
Until I mean, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx that he gets injured between now and then, but assuming he's able to show up healthy to the rink in their next game, he will break the record. Once again, Marleau, he'll probably go down in history as one of the best players in the league not to win anything.
Yeah,
So your thoughts on him very soon owning the record for most games played all by himself?
good for him. I told you I met him one time at work, and he's just a really down to earth guy, and um, good for him. Really good for him breaking that Going to be breaking that record. Man has played. When he was in Toronto, man, he was fantastic. He was extremely important for this rebuild with Marner and Matthews. The veteran presence he brought, it's an intangible you can't bring. to a team often, and he's just an overall amazing player. And it was sad to see him go, but good for him for going back to where he started in his career to finish there. And there's not many other players like you said, one of the best players to never win something, and it sucks because he deserves 4 cups at least. But yeah, good for him. I'm really proud of him.
Yeah, I mean, Thornton Marleau, that San Jose 1-2 that almost got there and got to the finals in 2016 and
2016,
just
yeah.
couldn't get the job done. Which, of course, myself as a Penguins fan, am very glad that they didn't get the job done. But
But
yeah,
you would have been happy to see them win a cup.
well,
Like
like maybe 5 years down, like maybe now looking back at it, but like
yeah.
when it's your team, obviously you want to win. But yeah, I mean that Sharks team, they just ran into Chicago and LA and Chicago and LA and Chicago and LA, and then when they
Yeah.
finally got to the finals, they ran into Pittsburgh, and it was like they just couldn't quite just beat that last hump. I swear, like they probably lost to the eventual Stanley Cup champion like most years they got knocked out of the playoffs.
Well, I don't think Martin Jones would have won a cup with that team. I really don't. I don't think he's a good enough goaltender. I think after that 2016 run, the Sharks should have traded for a goaltender instead of re-signing him because he's done absolutely nothing but nothing. And it feels bad. Thornton's on this team to Thornton's on his team for a cup. That's basically all he's playing for right now. Um, and then you got Pavelski on the Stars looking for a cup too, although his chances look worse than the Leafs right now, the way they're playing. And it's just, you want these guys to win. You really do. And that's why Marleau was brought to Toronto so many years ago, because you wanted him to win a cup. And it sucks. It sucks that some of these guys that deserve cups are never going to win them.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Marleau went to Toronto and then Pittsburgh to try to make a run. It ended up not working out. Now Thornton, like you said, he's making his run for it. Surprisingly, there weren't really too many veterans getting moved at the deadline to try to chase a cup, other than, I mean, Nick Foligno,
Coming
probably
to
the only
Toronto.
one.
Yeah.
Probably the only one. Because, I mean, Jeff Carter came to Pittsburgh naturally to compete, but, he's already won cups, so it's not like he's trying to chase a first ring in the way that Foligno is. So, which is surprising because, most of the time there is that sort of rental veteran player who ends up looking to go to a contender to try to win a cup, but we didn't really get too much of that this year.
Well, yeah, like you said, I say Nick Foligno. Nick Foligno is the most veteran one there. Played all of his career in Columbus, was the captain of that team. Leafs now have 4 former captains on their team, one of them being the actual captain, and John Tavares. So the Leafs really
Who is
brought
himself a former captain because
who
he was
was
the
him say,
captain
yeah,
of the
exactly.
Islanders.
So I really think it goes to show that bringing Foligno in is maybe his last chance of winning a cup too, because Columbus sure as hell ain't doing it anytime soon. So it's going to be very interesting playoffs to see for sure.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like the Leafs' top six is like one of the best top sixes of 2021, and then their bottom six would have been like the best top six of like 2012 with like Spezza and Thornton and Wayne Simmons and all of them
Well, if
now
you
in
compare
veteran roles.
lineups, like if you compare lineups on paper, like the Leafs have the best lineup in the league and like the most complete team in my opinion. You know,
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think Tampa with Kucherov beats you,
I'm saying
and
I'm saying overall though, the amount of talent that we
I
have,
think I think overall Tampa still beats you, and I think you can make an argument for Carolina even. I think you'd fall short. I think the Leafs are number 2 probably
I
behind
mean,
behind Tampa.
I'm only gonna disagree because I haven't really watched too much of Tampa and I've seen the Leafs and what the bottom 6 can do compared to the other teams in the division. It's hard to say this division in this year because it's just the same teams every single week. Like this could be a different argument we're having if it's the Leafs are in first and it's the Atlantic Division, but obviously we can't.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to compare across divisions, particularly when you don't play all of these other
Yeah,
teams.
like it's gonna be tough if the Leafs make it out of the North Division. If they're gonna have to play like a Tampa, they're gonna have to play like a Pittsburgh, they're gonna have to play a Colorado. Like it's gonna be a very good. It's gonna be very good playoffs for sure to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so maybe pivoting, maybe not pivoting, because you might give an answer that's a hockey player, you might give a different answer. But I saw this question online and I wanted to ask it as like a sort of talking point for this podcast. And I have my answer, but I'll let you answer first. And that is, if you could pick one player in any sport to have an injury-free career,
Ooh.
who would you pick? So a player whose career was impacted by injury, if they could have an injury-free career, which player would you pick?
Who did you pick? Because I got to think about this one.
So naturally, the first player that came to
Crosby.
mind was Sidney Crosby,
Yeah.
and then I was thinking about, okay, but from an unbiased perspective, which player would I pick instead? And I think my real answer is Mario Lemieux.
Because of cancer?
Because Lemieux in his cancer season put up 160 points in 60 games or something ridiculous like that. And then during the back end of his career, beyond the cancer, he was also dealing with injuries. And if you look at Lemieux's career numbers, if he plays the same number of seasons as if he plays the same number of games as Gretzky, like give or take around 1920 mainly healthy seasons, he's like only a couple hundred points. Like I think if you do the math, he's like 150, 200 points shy of Gretzky. And I think then that really puts into perspective just how close Lemieux was in terms of talent of Gretzky.
I was gonna say I was gonna say Lemieux as well. Like,
and then sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna like repeat what you're saying. Like, if he got that many points with cancer, imagine had he not gotten it. Like, holy crap.
Yeah, and I mean, people talk about the Gretzky 218 point season, 219 point season, whatever it is. There's a good chance that season, if Lemieux was fully healthy and played 82 games or 80 games or whatever the full season was at that point, I think it was an 80 game season back then.
Yeah, 80 game.
There's a chance that he would have broken that record or gotten real close. Which is why I was thinking that. Also, from a selfish perspective, being a Penguins fan, I think if Lemieux's fully healthy during the 90s, then the Penguins win at least one more, if not two more Stanley Cups during that time, considering they also had Jaromir Jagr.
Yep, they had Jagr as well.
And then, the other player I thought of was Crosby, just because I was looking at his stats, and though the 3 years where he was missed time due to concussion, and sure, this is I'll grant that it's a little unfair to take his points per game in like a 30 game season and extrapolate that over 82 games and assume that he would have kept that same pace, because it's really hard to keep up an extreme scoring pace over a full season. But I'm going to forgive myself for doing that, because I'm going to say if Crosby was putting up this number of points in a 30-game span while he was actively dealing with concussions, then I imagine he'd be able to, fully healthy, still score at that pace for a full season, if that makes any sense. But those 3 years where he missed the most time due to his concussion, so 2010 to 2013, he was on pace for 132, 138, and 127 point seasons.
Could have done it too.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is like people talk about the numbers that Connor McDavid's putting up, and rightfully so, because he's putting up ridiculous numbers. And people are like, well, Crosby never did that. And it's like, well, Crosby did put up 124 points in his second season, but he was on pace for multiple 130 point seasons. He just was dealing with concussions. And then there's also the argument of, would he be even better today if he had never had those concussions? And once again, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that, my answer is Crosby, just because of my age and I grew up watching Crosby. I think if I was, 15 years older, then my answer would definitely be Lemieux without a doubt. But just because I've watched Crosby grow up, like, I am adamant that if he had stayed fully healthy and had never gotten those concussions, the Penguins would have won another Stanley Cup during that stretch, if not two, but definitely at least one during that stretch. And it would have put a better sort of understanding of just how dominant he is. I did the math, and on his current points per game pace, if he was fully healthy, he'd be at about 1,700 points right now instead of the 1,300 that he's currently at. Basically, if he had played the same number of games as Ovechkin, he'd be like 300 points clear of Ovechkin. And if he played the number of games that Wayne Gretzky plays in his career, at his points per game, then he'll finish like third in the NHL in points in his career. And if he was fully healthy, he would have had a chance to hit 2,000 career points, which he won't because of the injuries. And I think that that's unfortunate because, you know, it's a lot easier for me to defend how dominant Sidney Crosby is if he has these numbers beside him. And that was ultimately taken away because of injury.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to kind of sum it up is how incredibly amazing these players could have been, would have been, should have been had they not been affected by a life-changing injury, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still crazy to think that Lemieux and Crosby are both top 5 all time, despite Lemieux having cancer and Crosby having multiple seasons lost due to concussions. Like the fact that despite that, they're still top 5 all time. In my and I'll argue Lemieux and Crosby are both top 5 all time, alongside Gretzky, Orr, and Howe. That's my top 5 at least. But I'm sure people will disagree with me, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I totally, man, I'm with you on that one.
So yeah, I mean, maybe let me ask you this then: outside of hockey, who would you pick? Injury-free career.
Oh man, I don't know, because there's so many different players that have been affected by injuries. Um, I don't know, man. Who would you pick?
Yeah, I was saying, I guess what you think. Another player that came to mind is imagine how dominant Derrick Rose would have been
Derrick
without
Rose. That's exactly who
his
I was gonna
ankle
say.
injury.
Yeah.
Um,
Grant Hill even like
yeah, yeah,
these are yeah. Derrick Rose, man. He deserves a chip.
yeah. Because that
Or
one season, his MVP season, he was only like 22 years old or 23 years old, and he basically went head to head with LeBron and like obviously didn't match him because the Cavs won the series, but or was it the Heat at that point? Anyways, LeBron won the series.
it was the
Um,
Heat.
it was either the end of his Cavs era or the beginning of his Heat era. I can't remember. But yeah, and that was when Derrick Rose was still like 22, 23. And so I can only imagine if he had stayed healthy, he would have had at least a couple other years going head to head with LeBron, and that would have been phenomenal to watch.
Another person that comes to mind is oh damn, I just had it. Gordon Hayward. Had he not got that leg injury, where do you think he would have won like a championship? Like so many what ifs, bro.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's more of a recent one. I mean, yeah, that's true to a certain extent as well. I mean, obviously that injury happened in his first game with his new team, so
Which
I feel like
sucks. Yeah.
that left a very bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, like kind of experiencing that. It was supposed to be like this sort of new era for him as a player, and ultimately that was dramatically changed
Yeah, it was a
for
pretty
sure.
gruesome injury too. It was pretty awful to watch.
Yeah, he missed the entire year. It was terrible.
It just goes to show that no one is exempt from injuries and how life-changing an injury can be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean that's why the thing with sports in real life is it's not like a video game where you can like turn injuries off, or
Yeah.
if like your player in your career mode has 90 potential, it means they're guaranteed to get to 90. It's like that doesn't happen in real life. Players don't develop. You can draft busts in real life. Not naming names or teams or Buffalo Sabres. No, I'm just kidding. I give him too much hate. I mean, the Flyers did draft Nolan Patrick second overall. Just saying.
Just saying. I'm just saying.
If we're counting draft mistakes.
But yeah, you never know what's going to happen in your career. Like me, would I be here had I not got injured in my last game of soccer? Like, I was drafted by scouted by the Whitecaps. Like, would I even be here? Like, I don't know.
I mean, would you have become best friends with Alphonso Davies and moved to Bayern Munich with him? Who knows?
Who knows? The Canadian duo? Uh,
Would you replace Manuel Neuer in net in the Champions League final?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably
but...
not. But let a man think and dream, all right?
Let a man dream, exactly. Just a couple of random headlines that I wanted to run past you as well as we move on. So the Masters took place, of
Yeah.
course, golf tournament, and it was won by Hideki Matsuyama, first Japanese winner of the Masters. So big shout out to Matsuyama and to Japan.
Did you
That's a
did
huge
you
accomplishment.
did you see how salty Johnson was giving him the green jacket?
I mean, I'd like to think he was happy for him,
Well,
but
I'm sure he was, but like it's tough, especially when you get eliminated up to the second cut, where you get cut from the second round, and then you have to stay in Augusta for another 2 days to see someone else win a jacket you could have won. Like I feel there'd be like a little bit of salt, but yeah, good for him and good for Japan for producing some good golfers, man. We don't. That's a little bit of a we kind of don't give them enough credit for the Asian golfers that have come in and played. Like for the women's, it's Kim, I believe, and for now they have a Masters too. So good for them.
yeah, they're definitely making good strides there. So I wanted to talk about that, and then also I saw this. There's a Instagram page that I kind of keep my eye on, and it's called WTF Stats, and occasionally they'll drop one that's like a heater, and this stat absolutely blew my mind. So last week, a softball pitcher for the University of North Texas, Hope Trotwine, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She pitched a perfect game, which is like, okay, fair enough. That's impressive. You know, there aren't a lot of perfect games pitched all the time, but she pitched a perfect game, striking out every single batter.
Holy shit!
7 innings, 21 strikeouts.
Woo!
And I was like, there's crazy stats, and then there's that.
Also, Labi, Anthony Mantha just scored his fourth goal in 4 games.
Still not worth the first to second in two players. But yeah, good for him.
I don't
Good
think
for him.
so.
Salty Penguins fan incoming, seeing capital C. But yeah, no,
Salt, salt,
that
salt.
statistic absolutely blew my mind.
That's crazy.
21
21
batters
strike.
faced, 21 strikeouts.
Woo! Man, that's a feat like I have no one else I knew could do.
Yeah. And like literally, the rest of her teammates like didn't need to line up. Like they didn't need. She
No.
didn't need fielders because she struck out every single batter.
Yeah, I got the Blue Jays on hold. They wanna talk with her.
Yeah, for real, especially with the amount of injuries that the Blue Jays pitchers have gotten to start the season.
Yeah,
Like,
speaking of injuries.
yeah, speaking of injuries, but yeah, I saw that statistic, and like there's some pretty good statistics. Like there was another statistic saying that Patrick Marleau has played at least one NHL game with like 38% of
37. It
every
was at
player.
30. Fucking. Oh, pardon my language. It was stupid ridiculous.
Yeah, which is like that's a crazy statistic, but that's more of like a I don't know, that's more people like searching for like crazy coincidences where this was just straight up one of the most dominant stat. Like that's a Wilt Chamberlain stat line if I've
Yeah,
ever seen one.
that is a GOAT status right there.
Absolutely. And then speaking of baseball, while we're on the topic of baseball, did you see Mookie Betts walk-off catch last night to
You know,
secure the win?
you don't really hear a lot about walk-off catches or walk-off, but that was a ridiculous catch. Holy crap, man. He laid out, and Dodgers again look dominant going for a back-to-back, which they probably will do because you got guys like Mookie Betts making plays like that. My goodness, what a play.
Yeah, speaking of lopsided trades, the Red Sox, what the hell were they doing? Get rid of Mookie Betts for that little. But yeah, I know the Dodgers.
Boston just had to make it up in the NHL.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Makeup call.
So the Dodgers have been look ridiculous, but the Padres are really making good strides. And Fernando Tatis Jr. is a bona fide superstar, and they've started to bring more and more talent to San Diego. They're in the same division, which is ridiculous. I'm like 90% sure they're in the same division. I'm not a big baseball guy. But what I do know is that it's very likely that the Dodgers and the Padres could meet in the playoffs. And just how phenomenal would it be based on last night's game to see a 7-game series between those two ball clubs? Like you said, the Dodgers definitely the favorites, definitely the World Series favorites, but I think the Padres would really give them a tough test, and it would be a phenomenal series.
Well, and then you got guys like pitcher Blake Snell over there who won't get pulled after 6 innings. So the Padres, you're right, have made absolutely fantastic steps to becoming champions, or at least contenders.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always nice to see that there are teams who are making a run at these sort of big talented teams. That's like the Blue Jays this year saying that they think they can compete with the Yankees, which I mean, I think is cute. Like, sorry Blue Jays, but we're not quite at the Yankees level this year. Um but hey, it's nice to dream, but no, it looks like the Padres are legitimate contenders to the Dodgers this year.
I agree.
Where like I'm not disrespecting the Blue Jays; they're more than capable of sneaking into a wild card this year and making the playoffs. But to think that they're gonna beat the Yankees in their division, I think that's shooting a little too far, a little too out of reach.
Well, I mean, if there's any year to prove it, it's this year for sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a golden opportunity. They got a lot of young talent. We'll see what they can do with it. Another storyline that I wanted to talk about is pivot into soccer a little bit. And before I talk about the big news that's kind of a developing story, MLS just kicked off, and
TFC.
we're not going to talk about TFC's yesterday's performance, as they lost their opener to Montreal 4-2. Instead, I want to talk about the CONCACAF Champions League. TFC drawn up against the Mexican champions Club Leon, and TFC missing like a lot of their players on their team, and they were able to emerge with a win. And it was huge to see. They really relied on a lot of their young academy players, and they were able to beat the defending Mexican champions, which was great to see. Obviously, not so impressive that they then
Yeah, couldn't beat
get
Montreal.
annihilated by Montreal. But yeah, it was good to see them beat the Mexican side, and hopefully they'll start to pick up some slack as the MLS season rolls on.
Is this going to be like a whole TFC? Is this a Toronto thing where they're so good against like the best team and then they play Montreal or something and they're like, we don't want to play anymore? Like, is this
Yeah,
going
I
to be
mean,
this is a reoccurring theme with Toronto teams?
yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like a very Toronto type of thing to do. Reminds me of when the last hockey game that I saw live before all of this COVID stuff happened was the Leafs shut the Penguins out 4-0
Oh
when
yeah, I
I was
remember
at the
that game.
game. Yeah, you were at the game too. And then I think a couple of days later was it wasn't was it the David Ayers game? I might be right in
No,
saying no.
maybe you're thinking because the week before we went to Buffalo and they got destroyed, and then we go to Pittsburgh and they destroy them.
Yeah, but it was something crazy like that where like the Leafs beat the Penguins 4-0, absolutely annihilated them while I was at the game. And then literally the next game they get blown out by some like garbage team. I'm like, that's the most Toronto thing ever to ruin my experience of just trying to watch my team play. And I wasn't
Yes.
even like too mad that we lost. I just wanted like I couldn't even celebrate a single goal. Like Teddy Bluger couldn't have scored, so I could have had like my moment, but no.
So
Had to get
so
shut out.
So for those who don't know what's going on, so in like February of 2020, Labi and we went to Buffalo with my parents to watch a Sabres game. Leafs get scored on in a minute, 3 times in a minute 14. Leaf fans remember that game. So then Lab's like, oh, let's go to the game on Thursday that week against Pittsburgh. And Labi's like, oh, it's going to be a great game, 4-0 Toronto. It was great for me. I was having a great time.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate Toronto thing. Let's beat one of the best teams in the league
Yeah,
after losing to the worst team in
not
the
only
league.
just beat the best team, shut them out.
Yeah, yeah,
That was fun.
typical. And then the
Whatever.
other soccer story that I wanted to mention, it was kind of a developing story all throughout today. For the last like couple of years, there were reports about like all of the biggest teams in Europe trying to break away and create their own Super League, but everyone kind of laughed them off. Well, today, 12 teams announced that they were going to
No,
create.
it's actually 16 now.
Is it 16 now? I was going to say,
Yep.
this is literally a developing story. So, like, the fact is, by the time this episode comes out, everything I say has probably been, like, has probably changed. So, just like that, I thought it was 12. I guess now it's 16. So, yeah, there's a certain number of teams who are separating to try to create their own Super League. And naturally, UEFA and, like, the domestic leagues that they're from aren't very happy about that. And basically, UEFA said that if teams join the Super League, they would be banned from playing in other competitions. So, like the Champions League, for example. And then they went even further and said that any players who played for their club teams in the Super League would be banned from representing their countries at the Euros or the World Cup. And so the last of the reports that I had, as I literally go to check Twitter to see if there have been new reports, because there probably have, was that they were then scrapping the idea of the Super League, and it was going to get canceled. Not sure what's going to come from this, but it's very interesting to see that an actual attempt has been made, and it looks like UEFA was able to get them to postpone their idea of this Super League, but it certainly is a very terrifying sort of account for soccer because this is an opportunity of like these are basically the biggest teams trying to create their own league and to make extra money, and like it is greedy because it takes away from the lesser teams, the teams that don't have as much money playing in the same leagues. And so I'm glad to see that it doesn't look like this is going to go through, but still it's a very interesting story to keep following in the coming days.
It's definitely terrifying to think that these teams think they can just do whatever they want, right? Just for what, money's sake. Like that kind of scares me how and there's not just one or two teams doing it. Like there's 16 who have agreed to do it. And you're right, good on UEFA for making they're going to be like, no, you guys are idiots. This is not happening. Um yeah, World Cup bans, and you know how important the World Cup is for any soccer player in the world. So, I don't. Yeah, all right. I don't think it'll go through either. But it's kind of terrifying to think that it's very much in the conversation of happening.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like it was something that was bound to happen, and so we've now got to this point where um, it looks like something's going on. Yeah, so the latest report is Florentino Perez, who I believe is the former chairman of Real Madrid, who's now looking to be like the head of the Super League, said that he will personally announce the Super League tonight. He considers it as, quote, the thing that will save our beloved sport. Not too sure about that, Mr. Perez, but yeah, so that's something to keep your eye on if you're a fan of soccer, because that would really change a whole lot in the realm of soccer, particularly as we get down to the end of the season. Leagues are finishing, teams are looking to win championships or down to the semifinals of the Champions League.
Yeah.
And for all of this to be going on, it's very interesting. And like you said, it's just absolutely greedy that these teams think that they can just do whatever they want.
Yeah, and that's super annoying for teams like you said who don't make as much revenue and who don't get as much publicity as some of these teams. And it's really I'd be pissed off at them. I'm like, okay, what about us? Like, you're just gonna forget about us? Like, we still exist. We're still a soccer team, and why can't we have the same shit as you can? And that's why the UEFA is like seriously hardening down on this.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you get rid of sort of the grassroots level or the lower level sort of teams, then you're not going to be able to have a high level sort of anything. I mean, if you look at, especially in the way soccer works, because it's so different from hockey or basketball or all these other sports where you play junior hockey or you go to college and play college hockey, college basketball, and then get drafted. Obviously, in soccer, it doesn't work that way. A lot of the time, you have these guys playing for their local team who, like you said, don't make a lot of revenue, don't make a lot of money. They're not a big team. And then as they get better, they go from slowly to a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger team. I mentioned Alphonso Davies. He was playing in Vancouver and then eventually finds his way to Bayern Munich. And, Messi was playing in Argentina and then Barcelona found him. And there are so many even less extreme examples. There are players in England who play for their local team in like the 5th division and then move to a 3rd division team and then to a 2nd division team and then to a worse 1st division team. And then finally, Manchester United buys them from like a Newcastle type of team, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, if you sort of continue to separate the biggest teams from these smaller teams, that's actually going to hurt the game, especially at a local level, especially, trying to support minor sports, like lower level sports. I know, like, especially with the pandemic, in Canada, people are talking about how, youth hockey's really taking a hit, junior hockey's really taking a hit, and trying to, like, preserve that. Like, the Memorial Cup got canceled again this year, and, junior teams, or major junior teams, are really struggling.
Yeah, and it's especially a good way to be scouted because this could be their future. There's people here who put their hearts and their lives into this game, and they really want to make a good impression, but they can't because everything's being canceled. And for this guy to come out and say this is gonna save our sport, what a dick move, bro. Like, no, it's gonna save like jobs and it's gonna save viewing. Like, it's not gonna save the sport. It's actually gonna probably make it worse.
Yeah, well, what it's going to do is it's going to give $300 million to the guys who already have $150 million. It's like, wow,
Like, yeah,
like, thanks. Who
like
cares?
yeah, like it's so stupid. Oh, so do you know Neville? So
Yeah, Gary Neville. Yeah, yeah.
so he wants the EPL clubs involved to be punished heavily, including he wants titles to be revoked.
Yeah, that would be very interesting because, of course, Manchester City, one of the teams in this who have agreed to join the Super League, they are miles ahead of everyone else in the Premier League. Actually, if I look at the Premier League table, Manchester City in first, Manchester United in second have both agreed to join the league, as have Chelsea in fifth, Liverpool in sixth, Tottenham in seventh, and I believe Arsenal are the last team. They're in ninth. And then here's the other thing too. The whole argument of this Super League is to say that these teams are too good for their domestic leagues, and so they need to play against the best of the best. And it's kind of ironic how Arsenal, who are in ninth place, and teams like Leicester and West Ham are ahead of them, are Arsenal, who tied 1-1 with Fulham this morning, are
Wow.
talking about how they're too good for the Premier League and they need to be in a Super League playing Barcelona and Real Madrid every week. Like, have fun. First of all, have fun never winning another game. And then also, it's like it would, like, Man City. Fair enough, they can make that argument considering they're 8 points clear atop the Premier League table. But even then, does Man City win every year? No, they haven't won. The last year they didn't win the title. Last year Liverpool won the title. They're in sixth place this year, and yeah, they're dealing with a lot of injuries this year. So fair enough. But like you said, it goes to show that the league changes every year. The same team isn't winning the championship every year, at least in England. And so for Neville to suggest that, that makes sense. And I think the most ironic thing about this is that Bayern Munich, who are about to win the Bundesliga for the 10th straight year. That's right. They're trying to win their league for the 10th year in a row, actually rejected joining the Super League. And so,
Huh.
huge respect to Bayern Munich. You'd think that the team who literally everyone says is too good for the German league because they've won it 9 years in a row, about to win it for their 10th year in a row, rejected this proposal saying that they didn't agree with it. So it makes you think.
That is interesting. It's like here's what it reminds me of: small dog, big bark. Like these small teams think they're better, or not small teams. I don't want to say like Barcelona and Man City but like you said, Bayern Munich's going for their 10th straight. I think they're just content with where they are right now. I don't think there's a reason why they have to be concerned about joining a super league when everyone knows they're a super team. It's stupid. It's such a stupid idea, man.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is, um, I really like the way that Germany organizes their soccer league and their national team. Um, so in Germany, the rule is it's a 50 plus one rule, which essentially means is that one person or like one company or one organization isn't allowed to have a majority stake in any team.
Right.
And now Red Bull have found a way to navigate around this rule, which is why RB Leipzig is like one of the most hated clubs in Europe, if not the most hated club in Germany for sure. Um,
Right.
because they kind of broke the rule without officially breaking the rule. But anyways, my point is in Germany is like most of these teams are fan owned. Bayern Munich is a fan owned team. You can buy a stock in Bayern Munich, kind of like for those like for Canadian American fans who maybe don't follow soccer as much. It's very similar, like how the Green Bay Packers are a fan-owned football team.
Yeah.
Almost every single team in Germany operates the same way.
which
And
is
then
a better way, in my opinion.
absolutely. And if you look at how that has helped, and then the German national team and the national development program actively focuses on the German leagues, not just the top league, but like the entire football league around them, like the second division, third division, everything like that. And basically what they did was about 10, 15 years ago, they realized that the German national team wasn't as good as it should have been. And so they made this investment in making sure that, German soccer was all about, developing the best German players and making sure the teams were sustainable and developing talent. And what happened? Germany won the World Cup 10 years later. Germany's one of the best teams nationally. Bayern Munich are the defending Champions League winners. Now, yes, they just got knocked out by PSG in the quarterfinals, but they're still one of the best teams in Europe, and they're able to do so without having a trillionaire owner. They're able to do so by still being a fan-owned team, and so that's why I have huge respect for Bayern Munich and the Bundesliga in general in terms of soccer. And I just thought that it's interesting how that team is rejecting the Super League proposal, and you have teams like Manchester City who are accepting it. Barcelona I kind of understand because Barcelona are legitimately bankrupt right now, which
Yeah.
but
But like you said, the difference between fan teams and trillion owner teams is the teams have that extra pressure kind of added on to be a good team and to be competitive is because they're owned by fans, right? Like
yeah,
Green
no, that's
Bay.
that's a fair argument too. Yeah.
Yeah, like they have that extra pressure to be kind of like, okay, listen, we can't just go out and just pretend, like not pretend to care, but like we can't go out and be subpar every game. Like we gotta go out there and fight. Like we have the fans on our backs, like believing in us, and they're the reasons why we have a team. And so we gotta. That's probably why that Bayern Munich doesn't want to, is because they probably think it's bad for the fans, and they probably think that the fans don't want this because they're very content with where they are, and the fans probably don't want to change what they have right now.
Yeah, and I mean it's pretty clear that the fans are against this. So what you're
Yeah,
saying is absolutely true.
you're right.
Absolutely true.
Everyone seems to be going against this. All the fans seem to be going against this. So teams owned by fans are probably going to be like, no, we don't want this.
Yeah. And actually one thing that this really reminds me of was a quote from, I don't know if he's still their chairman because I remember this quote from years ago, but the chairman of Bayern Munich at the time, and they were asking him because season tickets for Bayern Munich are still like ridiculously cheap. It's like I'm gonna get the figure wrong, but it's like $200 for the year, like £200, or no, not pound, €200 for like the season, or like some really cheap figure like that. And they were asking them, like, you're the best team in Germany, you're one of the best teams in the world, why aren't you charging more money? And he basically said, let's say we bump prices by €100, right? He basically said that raises, he did the math, and he said that raises like €500,000 for the club every year. And he said, when we're buying a player, paying a transfer fee for a player, €500,000 is a price that we negotiate in like 30 seconds. It's meaningless to us.
Yeah.
Adding an extra million here, a million there to buy players. Where asking a family to pay another €100 for their season ticket could be the difference between them being able to afford it or not. And so if we don't care about that extra €500,000 in revenue, but the family cares about having to pay that extra 100, that's why we don't raise our ticket prices. And that really like hit me, and I was like, this is a team that knows what they're doing.
Well, it goes to show that, and this is why a lot of teams should really take note. Is they have so much money. MLSC, I'm looking right at you for this one. Is they have so much money, and the fact that they have to raise tickets to make more money makes no sense to me. If in my unrealistic world, if Leaf tickets were only $150, you'd have more diehard Leaf fans out there, making Leaf games more enjoyable, making people want to come to games even more. So instead of charging $300 to sit in the top 300 nosebleeds with with all the corporate guys affording the seats in the low bowls, like you have more people who are diehard Leaf fans that really make the Leaf games more exciting to visit. And I think a lot of teams should realize that, hey, maybe we don't need that extra $200, $300 because we already have a shit ton of money, and you get more diehard fans and you have a better atmosphere at games for sure.
Yeah, no, the biggest problem with Toronto is you can't find tickets, and if you can, they're extremely expensive, where it doesn't become like an affordable thing for you to do. And I mean, we've joked about it all the time, but it's genuinely true. It's cheaper to drive to Buffalo and go watch the Leafs play in Buffalo.
Oh yeah, we've done it.
It's cheaper to drive to Detroit and watch the Leafs play in Detroit.
Yeah.
And it's, obviously Leafs fans talk about how strong their fan base is because games in Detroit, games in Buffalo, games in Florida, even with the amount of retired Torontonians moving to Florida, are essentially home games. And yes, that does speak to how great their fan base is. But like you said, it also speaks to just how, you know, uh, you know, unaffordable, how difficult it is to watch the Leafs play in Toronto.
Yeah, and if you look at the teams that have like the greatest fan bases, like Toronto, like Montreal, like their tickets aren't as affordable at home as they are on the road. So that's why these teams that are such powerhouse dominant teams and some of the greatest franchises are being like, are going to do like yeah, when we went to Buffalo, man, like how crazy was it when the Leafs scored? It was like a home game. It's because everyone can afford it. Like it sucks, especially being in Toronto with a team that is so good right now. Like imagine if fans were allowed to go and the Leafs are still like say it's a normal year and the Leafs are what third, maybe even second in the division ahead of Boston. Um, you know how expensive those tickets would be? Like it's stupid.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen the same thing happen across other sports. Like I remember, like me and my dad used to go to Raptors games all the time when I was a kid, and
Yeah.
like I'm talking like Primo Pasta and Andrea Bargnani era
Oh
Raptors.
man.
Like they were bad. Like they were real bad. And like you could get tickets like for $30, $40,
Yep.
and it was like a still a fun
Atmosphere.
time because like 9-year-old me didn't really care if the Raptors won or not. Like I was just enjoying the night watching a basketball game. Fast forward now, the Raptors, and now granted they've become way more popular just because more people are playing basketball, not just because they're good,
I
but
mean, they also won a championship in
yeah, like a
2019.
little bit of both. All of a sudden the Raptors are good, they're competing, they won a championship. You can't get Raptors tickets for cheap anymore.
No,
And
you can't
Toronto
even
FC
get.
did the same thing. Like I remember when Toronto FC were like first created. Like it's crazy to think that we're older than Toronto FC, but like
Yeah.
Toronto FC was founded in 2007, right? So I still remember when like you could get I remember because I was a season ticket holder at Toronto FC, and it changed a lot. Where like my a ticket for like my for like a regular season game would be like 25-30 bucks.
Hmm.
Now it's like 40 to 50. The tickets to go watch them in the Champions League, same ticket. It's a Champions League game versus a league game. The league game ticket was $40. The Champions League game ticket was $60. To watch them play in the semifinals was 80. To watch the finals, same seat, 100.
Yeah. Yep. It sucks for sure. And it's kind of a good way to wrap it up this episode. It's, you know, if you had a better, more reasonable price, you'd have more diehard fans going to your games
Yeah. And I mean,
because
yeah.
the guys who afford it, especially in Toronto, are the guys in suits making six figures a year. And
No,
like,
absolutely. That's why you see suits at Leafs games and the lower bowl is empty because they're all in their suites under the seats instead of in their seats watching the game.
and you remember when the Raptors won in 2019, like tickets down at rink at courtside were $50,000. How the hell are we supposed to afford that?
I mean, to be fair, that's where Drake sits. So like,
No, I know that, but like
no,
what I'm
for sure.
saying. It's ridiculous, stupid. Like if when Tampa made the finals, like if well, okay, let's go back because it's hard. When Vegas in the finals, there was no $50,000 seat tickets down at the lower bowl.
I think Anaheim were selling playoff tickets for like $9 a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, yeah. Senator fans were giving tickets out for like 20 in
Well,
2017.
the Senators had to reduce 2,000 seats in their stadium just to make it seem like it was more full, but that's a whole other story.
Buddy,
Um,
they've been starting the tarp since 2017.
yeah, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks talking about like attending sports events when obviously everything's canceled, but
Canceling.
yeah, no, I think it would be a cool topic like when everything gets back to normal to sort of talk about um, sports that are or like tickets to go to or like games to go to that are more affordable. Like that's I like the thing I'm really disappointed about not being able to watch live is like Team Canada, like the Canada soccer team, are starting World Cup qualifiers again, and I was really excited to go watch those games live, because like you're talking about guys like Alphonso Davies plays for Bayern Munich, Jonathan David plays for Lille, they're beating PSG right now in the French league. Like these are top level players, and because no one really cares about soccer too much in Canada, or because the team they're playing is like the Cayman Islands, that's not a lie. We played the Cayman Islands last month and beat them 10-0.
11-0.
Or 11-0. I can't remember. It was 10 or 11-0.
11. It was 11.
Yeah. I remember I saw Canada play the U.S. last year. We went to that game.
That was a great game.
The tickets were $20.
It was 2-0, and it was one of the best soccer games I'd ever been to in my life.
It was the first time Canada beat the U.S. in a soccer games, competitive soccer game, since like 1985 or something. So it was wild when they won.
Like, I can't thank you enough for taking me. That game was amazing.
Yeah, it's the last soccer game I went to before the shutdown, and that's why I was really looking forward. And they're still affordable games, but it's kind of crazy. Like honestly, I'd rather go to a Marlies game than a Leafs game. I mean, I'm not a Leafs fan, so like that's probably the reason why. But like,
no, but I'm with you. At least I can and the Marlies, it's the tick. Like you can't get a bad seat in the Marlies game. Like you can't.
No, yeah. Like you can go to a Marlies game, you can go to a Team Canada soccer game, and I'm talking like ticket, transportation to get there and get back home, food, drink for $50.
Yeah. Literally. And the Marlies games, they're good atmosphere too, man. Like it's a small crowd, like it's a smaller crowd, but that doesn't take away from the atmosphere. Like it's still a great experience to go to for sure. And like you said, tickets are like $20, $30.
Yeah, well, the last 2 years when the Marlies were in the playoffs, we went to a couple of...
we sat at the freaking glass, bro.
Yeah, we sat front row behind the net for the conference finals, and the tickets were $60.
No, it was the finals.
Or it was the Calder Cup final.
Yeah, it was the... and the Marlies killed them that year. Good on them.
Finally, that was the year they won the Calder Cup, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2018. We were right by. We were messing with McKenna the entire time, yelling at him.
Yep. Yeah, we were trying to provoke the Texas Stars goalie to fight one of the players. Obviously, it didn't work out.
Obviously, it didn't go the way we had hoped for a better result. That we want to see a goalie fight.
But it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
The Marlies didn't have Ray Emery at that point. Rest in peace, Ray Emery. He would have fought someone for sure.
Oh, 100%. But yeah, it was a fun experience, man. And it was like $50 a ticket.
Yeah, the tickets were like $50 or $60,
which is ridiculous for a Calder Cup championship game.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about it, and I was like, so like we can get tickets for $30, but for $60 we can sit front row behind the net, and we were both kind of just like, screw it, let's sit front row behind the net.
Well, and I'm like, you're kidding, right? Like $60 to sit behind. I'm like, and he's like, no, $60 for glass seats. I'm like, yes.
Which once to sort of wrap up, two experiences that when fans are allowed back in, and I know we have some American listeners and sports fans are allowed back in, so it's possible that some people listening are actually still able to go watch sports. So two types of seats that you should watch. You should watch a soccer game in the fan section.
Yep.
And you should watch at least one hockey game front row behind the net. It's not the best view for the game itself. Like, you will miss everything that goes on the other side. But just to see a shot, like, you can see the shots coming at the goalie because you're behind the net, or like a check along the boards. You truly appreciate how fast and how hard the shots are, how physical the game is right up close. So it's a great experience. Go ahead. I was just going to say, and sitting in the fan section with soccer, it creates a whole new atmosphere to the game that really gets you to enjoy it more.
Yeah, and like we said, you appreciate how fast the game is, but wait until you see like a hit in front of you, and then you're like, holy shit, these guys, like the hits sometimes don't look that serious, but when you hear it on the glass, it's incredible.
Yeah, if you sit front row and a puck gets fired at the glass and you don't
you're not paying attention.
Yeah, like if you just stand there and let the puck hit the glass like directly in front of where your face, like it's impossible. You will flinch out of just reflex of seeing something fired at your face like at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, it was
a cool experience.
It was honestly super fun to go to that game. And it got loud. Like, it was loud.
Hey, it's the finals. You got it. And I mean, all those guys were Leafs fans who couldn't afford to go watch the Leafs, so they decided to watch the
The
Marlies
Marlies.
win something.
Buddy, at least the Marlies have won something here.
There you go. If you want to see playoff wins in Toronto, go watch the Marlies.
Yeah,
And
go
with
watch
that,
that crazy Calder Cup. It had Kapanen, Janssen, Dubas was the GM for the Marlies.
yeah, no,
Sheldon Keefe
they had
was
a
the
lot.
head
Sheldon
coach.
Keefe was their coach.
It's crazy to think like how good the Marlies are at farming players.
But like, and that's what the best NHL teams do. They're able to develop players in the AHL. They're able to develop not just players but staff in the AHL. Like Mike Sullivan came from the Penguins AHL team. Mike Vellucci, who's our assistant coach this year, was the coach of the AHL team in Pittsburgh last year. And
Mhm.
a lot of people, like, there's this whole running joke about sort of Mark Donk and Buzz Flibbit, the two wingers that no one had ever heard of who somehow play with Evgeny Malkin and get 70 points a game. Well, part of the reason why they're able to, transition so seamlessly is because the AHL team plays the same style, plays the same strategy, learns the same way as the
Mhm.
NHL team. So it's a seamless transition. And the Leafs were able to really do that with that Marlies team because they all came over, not just the players, but a lot of the coaching staff and management staff around them. And it was a much more seamless transition where I'm sure Andreas Janssen, Kasperi Kapanen, although thank you for Kasperi Kapanen again
You're
back in
welcome.
Pittsburgh. But all these players, even a guy like Rasmus Sandin, Justin Hall, right? They come in and they're not having to adapt their game. They're playing the same game. It just happens to be in the NHL, and it's a much easier transition.
Yeah, especially like you said, when Sheldon Keefe came up to replace Mike Babcock, like half of the players on the Leafs had already been coached under him.
That was probably the main reason why they hired a guy like that because he already has that rapport with the players.
Yeah, and like he won the championship, and so that's why when Dubas came in, and then Dubas fired, because there were reports, and I believe it's true that Dubas did not click with Babcock. Like his style was not the reason why the Marlies won the championship. It's because he's more of a player coach, and he's more of a forward thinking guy, and you saw that in building the Toronto team they have right now.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. And
And like when he fired him and brought in Keith, like that's already a guy and it can be a very good coach for that team that is just looking for something, some kind of tension, some kind of traction.
absolutely. And, sometimes the best solution is already inside. And, a lot of soccer teams do that, right? Where, like, the academy team, the youth team, the under 23s, the under 18s, even going to, like, the under 15s, the under 12s, the under 10s,
Hmm.
they all play the same style as the senior team. So as they transition and they get older, as they move from, like, the B team to the A team, they don't have to change their style of play because they're playing the same style. They just have to focus on adapting to playing against better players. And it makes it so much easier for players to sort of transition in. And I'd love to see that happen more at the NHL. Obviously, it's difficult because, like we said, in soccer, Barcelona had Lionel Messi since he was like 8 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously you don't do the same thing in hockey. Like you draft guys when they're 18, and so you're not able to control their development at the junior level. Um, but I think teams have sort of realized that. Why do you think so many London Knights get drafted every year? Because the London Knights have a reputation for being an extremely well coached and well managed junior team. And so management knows that when they draft a player from the London Knights, that they've been coached, they've been developed, they have those habits already in place, right?
Yeah, like
And
yeah.
it would be great, and you're starting to see that happen more at the AHL level where it's kind of treated like a B team. Truly, it's not just like, oh well, here's our 35-year-old fighter, let's just throw him in the minors. It's like, no, like Cole Caulfield is playing in the minors right now for Montreal.
He was
And now
actually called up.
I was gonna say, granted, he rightfully got called up because he's too good for the minors. But my point is, like, guys like Trevor Zegras down in the minors, who also is too good for the minors and got called up. But my point is that these young players, they can spend some time learning the system of the team in the minors. So when they get to the NHL, they just have to worry about playing against the best players. They don't have to worry about, okay, well, in this situation, what does my team want me to do? Because they already know because they learned it in the AHL.
Yeah, and it makes it just so much easier for teams that are looking to kind of make an impact now, is you don't have to worry about like how is this guy going to mesh with this guy. It's more like he's going to mesh because he's already meshed with him. Like it's just so much easier.
Yeah, and especially now we talk all the time about how guys draft in the first round, guys draft in the top 10, they're expected to produce right away, right? You expect young guys to deliver right away. There's no longer this forgiving, oh, he's learning in the league. It's been 2 seasons and people already want to call like Jack Hughes a bust,
Yeah.
which is extremely harsh on him because like the kid's still like 20 years old.
Yeah, and that's just how it is. Like people, and it's a bad comparison. You can't compare every single first rounder to McDavid or Sidney Crosby or McKinnon. Like you just can't.
No, absolutely. And, ultimately this level of development, this level of coaching, all this stuff, that can only help these young guys where like, if you're expecting this guy to put up 50 points, well, you got to build the right, environment around him where he's able to, play up to his best and actually, make those strides to get 50 points. You can't just drop a guy. You can't just pick up a guy from like the OHL, throw him in the NHL and say, get 50 points. Like that doesn't happen unless you're like a Crosby or McDavid. And, you need to have the right systems in place, the right coaching, the right everything around you, the right structure in order to help these guys. You can't just drop them in and then be like, go. Because that's how you're going to fail. And that's why certain teams like, once again, not to constantly bring Buffalo into this because it's more than just Buffalo. But that's why certain teams get a reputation for not being good teams to get drafted to. Because they like, and this whole thing of like, oh, if you get drafted by like the New York Jets, they ruin your career. It's like, is that just because the New York Jets draft bad players? Or is it because the New York Jets don't have good coaching and development in their organization? And it's
Yeah.
probably a mix of both.
And it starts at the top. Like if your management's not going to be good, your coaching's not going to be good, and the rest is history.
Right. So what I'm hearing is the Jets should hire Rex Ryan again.
Bring him back,
full
Rexy
send.
boy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with that, we will wrap up another episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. And if you're listening on YouTube and you like this video, give it a like or subscribe to our channel. And if you're listening on any sort of audio platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else, 5-star review. I don't know what else you can do on these podcast sites. I should really look into that more. Follow us on Spotify. I think that's what you do. But thank you guys again for listening, and we'll be back next week.